Your Excellency Ambassador Omar Geneva, Chair of the WIPO General Assembly, Honourable Ministers, Your Excellencies, the Permanent Representatives and Ambassadors, distinguished delegates. It's a great pleasure for me to join the Chair of the General Assembly in extending a very warm welcome to all delegations to the 2020 assemblies, which are taking place, of course, in the challenging and difficult circumstances of the COVID-19 pandemic. I thank all delegations that have been able to be present physically for their presence, and likewise all delegations who are connected to the meeting in various parts of the world for their attention. I'm delighted that the Director General-elect, Mr. Darren Tang, has joined us for the opening session. As you are all acutely aware, Darren Tang takes over as Director General in the middle of next week. After months of dedicated preparation since his appointment in May of this year, I wish him every success in his tenure, which I'm sure will be an outstanding one that will lead the organisation forward in every way, really. I should like to thank the Chair of the General Assembly, Ambassador Omar Geneva, for his close attention to the organisation and his hard work over the past 12 months in the many meetings and consultations that he's led to ensure that these assemblies could take place and could achieve whatever was possible in the restrictive and difficult circumstances of the COVID-19 pandemic. Equally, I should like to take the opportunity to thank the outgoing Chair of the WIPO Coordination Committee, Ambassador François Rivasseau of France, and to congratulate him on successfully shepherding the process for the nomination of the new Director General. I also thank the many chairs of the organisation's other bodies, the various committees and working groups for their tremendous efforts and dedication in taking the work of the organisation forward. Now let me turn to the business of the assemblies. As I shall be leaving office in 10 days' time, please allow me to start with a few words about the progress of the organisation over the past 12 years. I shall then deal briefly with the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on our operations. And finally, please permit me one or two observations of a more general nature. Now, starting with the past 12 years, I must say that it has been the consistent experience of my life that when I'm on the point of leaving a job, I feel for the very first time qualified to start it. And that, of course, has not been very good news for my employers. But despite this inconvenience, the organisation has been able to prosper and to thrive in the past 12 years. I've prepared a very detailed written report that's available outside the meeting room, and I'm not going to enter into all of the details. You'll be very, very happy to hear of that report. But I do believe that all stakeholders and the many contributors to the organisation's operations, starting with the Member States, have every reason to be pleased with the progress of the organisation and the progress it has been able to achieve as a result of a collective effort over the past 12 years. It's been a period of growth and expansion that may be measured by a number of different indicators. The organisation's global IP systems have extended their geographical reach and considerably grown their user bases worldwide. There's been record buy-in to the treaties administered by the organisation, with over 400 accessions to those treaties, the majority of them coming from the developing and least developed countries. Two new treaties, the Beijing Treaty and the Marrakesh Treaty, have been concluded and have now entered into force, and a substantial revision of an existing treaty, the Lisbon Agreement, has also been concluded and has entered into force in the form of the Geneva Act of the Lisbon Agreement. The financial situation of the organisation has flourished with consistent surpluses, enabling the organisation to be debt-free and to build the net assets, which now stand at 364 million Swiss francs, which is well beyond the target level set by the Member States. At the same time, the fees under our global IP systems, the PCT, the Madrid system, the Hague system, have remained constant over the course of the past 12 years. The development dimension has been mainstreamed, and the development agenda has been advanced from a series of recommendations to concrete implementation in many areas. We've built also a number of successful public-private partnerships that contribute in various ways to the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. We've added new programs and services such as IT platforms, databases and services that have been embraced across the world, and economic analysis, the Global Innovation Index, and statistical and data analytics. We've renovated the campus with the addition of 2 new buildings that were delivered on time and on budget. And the organisation has also embraced digital transformation, with all external-facing services working and operating and delivering their services on electronic platforms, and all administrative and management procedures now digitised. The year 2020 has, of course, to state the obvious, been a very challenging year for the whole world, as everyone is very much aware, with the COVID-19 pandemic bringing widespread suffering and economic and social disruption. For WIPO, the negative impact has so far been, relatively speaking, limited. Thanks to the embrace of digital transformation, the global IP systems were able to continue to operate at near maximum levels, service levels, throughout the period of the lockdown that we experienced here in Geneva earlier this year. The 2 areas that have been, of course, as you are all aware, adversely affected are the normative committees and meetings in general, and development cooperation, both obviously affected by travel restrictions and social distancing measures. My colleagues have made major efforts to maintain communications with officers throughout the world and member states throughout the world. Inevitably, however, full operating capacity in those 2 areas has been reduced. In contrast, up until now, the financial position of the organisation has not been adversely impacted. We're running a strong surplus for the first 8 months of the year 2020. This is a consequence of the underlying performance of our global IP systems, which have remained remarkably resilient, with demand increased in the PCT and not yet badly affected in the Madrid and Hague systems, the other services. And while we know that the impact of an economic downturn on the PCT is usually delayed because international applications reflect activity that took place at the national level 12 months prior, the relatively positive, while that's the case, the relatively positive results are still somewhat surprising. Now, understanding the evolution of demand in our global systems is, of course, absolutely fundamental to planning, budgeting, and management. Nevertheless, it would be a rather speculative exercise at this stage to attempt to explain what is happening. We're in close contacts with the countries that are the major sources of filings. And the situation in those countries is not inconsistent with what we're seeing here at WIPO at this stage. There are several possible explanatory factors that we've been considering, although, as I've said, these are very much speculative in nature. I think one factor to consider is that IP filings worldwide for at least the last 10 years have consistently outperformed the world economy. So they've been running at up to 2 times the rate of increase of the global economy, the economic growth in the global economy. So, and that's of course a consequence of the emphasis that is placed by governments and enterprises on innovation and thus on intellectual property, as a means of securing competitive advantage and as a major factor in economic growth. So it's perhaps not surprising that if IP filings have well outperformed in relatively good times the world economy, that they are underperforming in terms of decline or decrease in times of economic recession. It's a very general explanation, but is one that I think may have some bearing on the situation. I think the changing geography of the main sources of demand for international IP filings may also be in play. And there, as you are all aware, what we have seen is that Asia has been on the rise in the relative share of filings, now accounting, for example, for the origin of over 50% of all filings under the PCT, which in turn is responsible for 76% of the income of the organization. Now, preliminary data on filings from China in the first 6 months of 2020 indicate a sharp increase in international patent applications filed under the PCT. And that comes on what was already the single largest volume or source of PCT applications. So those are two factors to reflect upon, but despite the relatively good performance in 2020, vigilance is certainly the order of the day, and I'm, of course, telling you nothing there. It's hard to imagine that the organisation will be able to go through 2021 unscathed, but we are in a sound financial position to weather the storm. On the management and policy side of the impact of COVID-19 on the operations of the organisation, we can see that teleworking has worked, and it is likely to become a permanent feature of the human resource management landscape in the future. 80% of the some 1,000 employees of the organisation who have returned to the workplace have chosen the teleworking option, which involves being present on campus 2 days out of 5. And they've chosen that as part of their reintegration to the workplace. There will be many adjustments to be made in management and policy if indeed teleworking does become a permanent feature of the human resource management environment, which I think is likely. In program terms, the durability of the crisis requires, I believe, that member states reimagine the meeting. This may require investment in better virtual platforms, greater emphasis on preparations and discussions before the holding of meetings, and eventually tinkering with some procedures. Now, I'm fully aware that there is resistance to this direction, but I think we need to carefully consider how long it is likely to be before travel and national health measures are eased so that all parts of the world will be able to travel freely and without restriction to Geneva. And the answer would seem to be a long time. And pending that, in many respects, the normative agenda remains in standstill, or at a standstill, while technology continues to advance at an increasing pace, inevitably throwing up questions and issues that may require attention. Now let me turn to one or two observations of a more general nature. It's clear that technology, and in particular the internet, the platforms, business models, and businesses built upon it, has connected the world in ways that are qualitatively different from anything that we've ever seen before. In the year 2020, now for example, there are around 3.5 billion smartphone users worldwide. There are some 4 billion email users. and around 306 billion emails are sent every day. By the way, about 55% of them are spam. Global mobile messaging apps experience similarly large volumes of traffic. There are about 2 billion active monthly users of WhatsApp, about 1.2 billion active monthly users of WeChat. Facebook has about 2.7 billion monthly active users. And I could multiply the examples and broaden the indicators to other areas to show how economic, social, and cultural life are all connected worldwide. And it's absolutely clear that the world is now more connected than it has ever been, probably more open and transparent as a consequence. But against this development of connection and connectivity of the peoples of the world, there is a countercurrent. There are increasing signs of closure in the world. Foreign direct investment has plummeted. Protectionism has risen. Global value chains are being dismantled or reorganized. Foreign investment screening conditions are changing and tightening in many countries throughout the world. And these are not trends caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. They're pre-existing trends that emerged before the pandemic, but of course the measures of restriction necessitated by the health management of the pandemic have to some extent accelerated those trends. So we are in a position in which the logic of technological development is pitted against the movement of policy geopolitically. And on the basis of history, I would be very surprised if, in the long term, technology did not prevail. There are few, if any, examples of reversing fundamental technology that has taken root in the fabric of the economy, society, and cultural life. Now, there are many risks, of course, with the collision of these two currents, ranging from the separation of peoples from governments to the disruption of economic and social life. In view of the global nature of both currents, there seems to be only one way in which the two currents may be guided to a peaceful confluence. And that, of course, is through international cooperation that is global in nature, or in other words, multilateralism. We're all aware that the appetite or the capacity for such multilateral action is regrettably diminished at the moment. The reconstruction of this appetite or capacity, with the inevitable changes in architecture and in procedures that it may entail, is one of the major challenges that confronts the world in the coming years and decades. I'm not going to enter into the exceptionally complex task of what such a reconstruction might involve. Suffice it to say that the task is a long and difficult one, and that the risks of failure take us into unknown and perilous waters. It involves just about every single dimension of policy, including security, personal and political freedoms, market and competition supervision, tax authority, the integrity of information and data, and the conduct of economic and social life. Intellectual property is very much part of these policy changes. It's historically been a vector of international connections, a means of trading and consuming intellectual and cultural assets, and we've seen emerge over the course of the past 2 decades global markets or audiences for music, for audiovisual works, for literary works, for scientific publications, for technologies built upon different business models, most of which rely on digital technology and connectivity. The market has changed and expanded. The process of adjustment to the new world that has been and is being built upon the direction of technology is an extraordinarily complex and difficult one that requires the goodwill of all member states. I'm hopeful that in the small world of intellectual property, WIPO will be able to continue to make a contribution to this adjustment. Now, let me turn to thank the many people who have contributed to the organization's operations in the course of the past 12 years. And I start with the member states, and I thank them for their engagement in and support for the organization, and especially for their indulgence of inevitable imperfections. In particular, I thank the Government of Australia for having nominated me to the post of Director General and for its support over the years. I thank all of the staff. We're fortunate to have an extremely talented and professional staff at WIPO who have responded more than well to the many challenges and changes that reform and digital transformation bring. In particular, I thank the senior management team, the 4 Deputy Directors General, Sylvie Forbin, Mario Matus, John Sandage, and Binying Wong, the 4 Assistant Directors General, Aminlek Getahun, Naresh Prasad, Ambi Sundaram, and Yo Takagi, the Legal Counsel, Fritz Bontuko, and the Director of the Human Resources Management Department, Cornelia Musa. They've all made outstanding contributions and have led their sectors with dedication and aplomb and succeeded in moving their sectors in a very positive direction. I should like especially to mention those who have accompanied me through the full journey of 12 years amongst the senior management team, notably Binying Wong, Naresh Prasad, Ambi Sundaram, and Yo Takagi. And of them, Naresh Prasad has probably had to suffer the most in his close connection with my functions as Chief of Staff. 12 years is a long time to put up with someone, and I'm deeply grateful to them for their perseverance, tolerance, and indulgence. And they, like the other members of the senior management team, have been immensely supportive. Please allow me to mention 4 special persons who have had to endure more than most in supporting me, namely my assistants Christine Collard, Cécile Müller, Tatiana Narcisse, and Marie-Antoine Rideau. 2 of them have worked with me for 25 years, which is a long sentence, and I wouldn't have been able to undertake my duties without their careful and professional support. We are now quite a large organisation, and we rely on many external service providers, especially in the areas of security, cleaning, languages, IT, and catering. And these service providers are part of the organisation and its achievements, and their work has made major contributions, and I thank them. I thank also the industry, professional, and civil society, non-governmental organisations that have followed, supported, and guided the work of the organisation. Their contribution has become increasingly important to the success of the organisation. So, it has been a privilege to have had the opportunity to serve as Director General, and the greatest privilege of all has been the opportunity to meet so many people from so many different walks of life. This has provided the opportunity for opening to the richness and diversity of the world, and for understanding that we share a common human heritage, experience, identity, and, as COVID-19 is teaching us, destiny. Thank you very much.